The sun rose like a promise over Maple Creek Valley, pouring gold across fields that once belonged to the Carter family. Wheat swayed gently in the warm morning breeze, brushing against the old red tractor parked beside the barn, the last piece of Emma Carter's father's life's work. The air carried a quiet ache, the kind that comes when something sacred is about to be lost. Emma stood there, fingers grazing the cool metal of the tractor. Her father's worn jacket still hung over the seat, a ghost of his presence. She took a deep breath and looked down at the faded envelope in her hands. Inside it, every last cent she had left. Enough, she hoped, to save the land he'd spent 40 years tending. In town, whispers had already spread. The Carter farm, 100 acres of prime soil, was going up for auction today. Developers and realtors were circling like hawks, eager to turn the land into another row of luxury homes. But Emma wasn't ready to give up. Not on her father's dream, not on the promise she made at his grave. "I'll protect this land, Daddy. I'll keep it safe." By the time she reached the courthouse steps, a crowd had gathered. Men in sharp suits, sunglasses gleaming, the smell of polished leather and money in the air. And among them stood Richard Hale, the town's most arrogant realtor, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. He leaned against his black Mercedes, straightening his cufflinks as Emma approached. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "Little Miss Carter, trying to play with the big boys." A few others chuckled. One of them whispered, "She doesn't stand a chance." Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm here for what's mine," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. Richard smirked. "Yours? Oh, sweetheart, this is business, not a charity auction." The judge's gavel echoed through the air, calling everyone to attention. The auction began. One by one, hands rose, numbers climbed, and Emma's hope began to fade with each passing second. 50,000? Someone called. 60, another replied. Then Richard's voice cut through the noise. 75. Emma clutched her envelope tighter. That was already more than she had. Still, she raised her hand. 80! Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her cheeks flushed with fear and determination. She could almost hear her father's voice in her heart. "Don't back down, Em." But Richard wasn't done. He grinned, lifted his hand, and said, 100,000. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to Emma. Her throat tightened. She knew she couldn't match it. She lowered her gaze, the envelope trembling in her hands. Richard leaned toward her with a smug smile. "You should have sold while you had the chance. Maybe then you could have afforded something smaller, like a vegetable patch." The laughter broke out. Even the auction clerk hesitated before glancing at the judge for the final call. Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She took a step back, trying to steady herself. And then something changed. As the judge reached for the gavel, he froze, his brow furrowed. He turned a few pages in the file before him, eyes scanning faster, confusion deepening. The laughter in the room faded to murmurs. "What's wrong?" Richard asked impatiently. The judge didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted his glasses and looked up, straight at Emma. His expression had shifted completely. What once was routine now carried an odd weight, almost disbelief. He cleared his throat. "Before we proceed," he said slowly, "there's something that requires immediate attention." Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" The judge reached into the folder and lifted a single yellow document, sealed with a faded stamp. The light from the window caught its edges, dust floating like golden particles in the air. "I don't understand," Richard muttered. "What is that?" The judge hesitated, then turned the page toward Emma. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "this was found attached to your father's original property records. It appears there's a clause." A silence fell so heavy that even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to stop. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Around her, the crowd leaned closer. Richard's confident smirk faltered just a little. The judge's hands trembled slightly as he continued reading, eyes moving across the text. Then, in a voice that carried through the entire room, he said, "This document, if verified, changes everything." Emma's lips parted in confusion. "What do you mean, changes everything?" The judge looked directly into her eyes, then slowly removed his glasses. His next words came with quiet gravity. "Miss Carter, before we continue, there's something you need to see." The air seemed to still. Even Richard's laughter had vanished, replaced by the faint sound of shuffling feet and uncertain whispers. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. The envelope slipped from her trembling hand, scattering her savings across the wooden floor. The sunlight through the courthouse window painted everything gold, marking the coins, the papers, even the tears. She didn't realize it started to fall, and as she bent to pick them up, the judge held out the document, the one piece of paper that might just rewrite her family's fate. But what happened next would shock everyone watching. If you believe kindness and honesty always find their way back, Hit like, share this story, and subscribe for more heart-touching tales. The midday sun poured through the courthouse windows, flooding the room in a warm golden glow that contrasted sharply with the tension hanging in the air. The sound of shuffling papers, uneasy murmurs, and distant birds from the open window filled the silence that followed the judge's startling announcement. Dust motes danced like sparks in the sunlight, suspended in a moment that felt too unreal to breathe. Emma Carter stood frozen in place. Her eyes were wide, her heart pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. The judge's voice echoed, faintly in her ears. By order of the late Henry Carter. She blinked, trying to process what she'd just heard. Her father had done this. Across the courtroom, Richard Hale's smug confidence began to crack. The man who had strutted through the morning as though he owned the world now looked pale and cornered. His fingers tightened around his briefcase handle until his knuckles whitened. "Oh, this is absurd," he barked suddenly, his voice rising. "That document could be a mistake. Forged. Something from years ago that shouldn't even apply anymore." The judge didn't even look up. His voice remained calm but firm, like a storm held at bay. "Mr. Hale, the deed is signed, notarized and archived in the county's legal records, verified by 2 witnesses, one of them still living." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. The same townsfolk who'd whispered behind Emma's back now stared at Richard with growing disdain. Murmurs turned into murmured curses. Someone whispered, "That poor girl was telling the truth all along." Richard's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You can't just—" "Enough," the judge said sharply, his gavel striking the wood with a thunderous crack that silenced the entire hall. "The court has spoken. The land known as the Carter Farm, and all its adjoining fields, remain under the Carter name. Permanently." For a heartbeat, the world went still. Then came a sound, faint at first, like the wind brushing through wheat. Applause. It started with one old man in the back, then spread like fire through the crowd. People who'd once pitied Emma now clapped for her. She turned slowly, eyes glistening, her trembling hand clutching the deed the judge had just handed her. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He protected it. All this time." Outside, sunlight washed over the courthouse steps where Emma stood, the papers pressed tightly against her chest. For the first time in months, she wasn't holding back her tears. They fell freely now, not from pain, but from something deeper. Relief, gratitude, love. She looked up at the sky, squinting against the brilliant light. "You kept your promise, Daddy," she murmured, voice breaking softly. "You didn't let them take it." Behind her, the wooden doors swung open and the townspeople spilled out, their earlier laughter replaced by quiet respect. A few of them approached, offering gentle smiles and hesitant apologies. "We didn't know," one woman said. "Your father was a good man." Emma nodded, her voice steady now. "He was the best." But amid the quiet congratulations, one figure lingered. Richard Hale. His sharp suit looked suddenly too tight, his polished shoes scuffed by the courthouse dust. He glared at Emma with resentment and disbelief. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed under his breath as he passed her. "People like you don't belong among us. You got lucky, that's all." Emma didn't flinch this time. She simply looked at him, calm and unshaken. "It's not luck, Mr. Hale," she said softly. "It's legacy." He froze for a second, searching for words that wouldn't come. Then he turned away, the sound of his expensive shoes fading down the steps, swallowed by the hum of a crowd that no longer cared for his arrogance. Moments later, a small voice broke through the noise. "Miss Carter!" Emma turned. A little boy, no older than 8, came running from the road, his straw hat nearly flying off. In his tiny hand, he held a single wildflower, a bright yellow, fresh from the edge of her family's fields. "My mom said to give you this," the boy said shyly. "It grew near your daddy's fence." Emma knelt, her smile trembling as she took the flower. "Thank you," she whispered, brushing his hair gently. "It's perfect." The boy grinned, before running back to his mother, his laughter echoing through the sunlit square. Emma stood there for a long time, watching the golden petals sway in the wind. Around her, the valley stretched wide and endless, the same fields her father had plowed under the summer sun, the same soil he had taught her to cherish. And now it was hers. She looked out toward the horizon, where the land met the sky, glowing with the soft amber hue of afternoon light. Somewhere, she could almost feel her father's hand on her shoulder, not heavy, but reassuring. The wildflower in her hand caught the sunlight, its stem trembling in the breeze. She smiled through her tears. "You kept your promise," she said again, quieter this time. "And I'll keep mine." The camera lingers on her as she begins walking back down the dusty road, the courthouse fading behind her, the fields stretching ahead, golden and alive once more. Her hair glows in the sunlight, her footsteps steady, and just before the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice carries the weight of the story's truth. Sometimes the promises made in silence outlast the voices that once spoke them, and the kindness of one heart can echo through generations. Would you stand up for what's right, even when everyone laughs at you? Tell us your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes courage doesn't shout. It simply stands tall in the light,